Hey everybody, welcome to Pack 1 Pick 1 number 209 on the Maraleaf. I'm John as always, and we have ourselves another pack of Throne of Eldraine here to open up. And this is not an open it up and see what I got and say, haha, I got this card. This is a strategy discussion video. We're going to take a look at all the cards in here and figure out what we would pick, Pack 1 Pick 1, if this was a draft. If you go over to patreon.com/Maraleaf and you become a $5 backer or above, you get a chance to win all the cards out of this pack each week, or some of the cards, none of the cards, whatever you happen to want. It's all about you. And this week, that's going to Squeaky El Lobo. If you want a chance to win packs in other ways, perhaps Throne of Eldraine packs, perhaps Throne of Eldraine collector pack, or other spicy stuff, go over to twitch.tv/Maraleaf on November 2nd, where I'll be doing a 24-hour Extra Life charity stream. It's my 4th annual. We have a bunch of fun. We play a lot of Magic, a lot of Jackbox games, and we do a lot of giveaways. So check that out. Hoping to break my record from last year and cross over $5,000 lifetime over the last 4 years raised for the Children's Hospital here in London. But let's crack this open, see what's in it, and see what we would take Pack 1 Pick 1 if this was a draft. Up first, we have Rimrock Knight. Rimrock Knight is 1 and a red for a creature dwarf knight. It's a 3/1 that can't block. Oh no. And for a single red mana, you can do Boulder Rush, which is an instant speed combat trick. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I love Rimrock Knight. 3/1 for 2. My favorite stats. Having a combat trick that I can use if I'm not just jamming this down on turn 2 is solid. Not being a human is solid. Being a knight is solid. Everything about this card is great. It is not a first pick, but I'm pretty happy to jam multiples of these in many, many, many decks. Up next is Outflank. Outflank is a single white mana for an instant. Outflank deals damage to target attacking or blocking creature equal to the number of creatures you control. I still don't like this card. I talked about this in my set review. I wasn't a big fan of this because not only is it a removal spell only in combat, but it's a removal spell only in combat that explicitly cares about the number of creatures you have, which means a lot of the times this does not do anything, and that's been my experience with it so far. Yes, I've played it. Yes, I've killed some things, but I'm not going out of my way to play this card. Like a lot of white removal spells that aren't pacifism or the like, I'm hesitant to play multiples of these, and I'm hesitant to play the first one. I am not ever first picking an Outflank. Up next is Didn't Say Please. I had Dennis Nedry in my head. You didn't say the magic word. 1 blue for an instant counter target spell. Its controller puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. This card is super solid in the mill deck because not only does it counter a spell, not only do you get that tempo, not have that threat on the board, you also continue your mill plan. If you are in the mill deck, you need to be playing these. You need multiple copies of these if you can. Outside of that, it's just a cancel if you're not actually trying to actively mill them, and I'm not a big fan of playing it there. But if you're in that mill plan, you want to be picking these up. Don't pick these up to go into the mill plan though. That's not what you want to do. So not a first pick, never ever a first pick, but it has its place. Up next is Malevolent Noble. Malevolent Noble is 1 and a black for a creature human noble. It's a 2/2, pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or another creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Malevolent Noble. People have been very high on this, and I still haven't seen it on my side of the table go off, and I don't think I've seen it on my opponent's side of the table either. I've seen it get like a counter, or perhaps 2. It is a 2/2 for 2, so it's not horrendous, but I feel like it's a little magical Christmas landy to be going off with this. If you're making a whole bunch of food, I feel like you have other things that you can do with it, or better choices. This just feels like a super bottom of the rung kind of card for me. So I'm still out on it. I'm still not looking to actively play it or actively pick it that highly. But as a 2/2 for 2 at the absolute base, it obviously can't be awful, but it's not a first pick. Rose Thorn Hallberg. Rose Thorn Hallberg is a single green mana for an artifact equipment with an equip cost of 5. When it ETBs, though, you do get to automatically equip it to a non-human, and it gives +2/+1. That's not that exciting. This card is shockingly good. It really does a lot of different things, and I was pretty down on it, and I'm not down on it anymore. I actually picked this kind of middle of the pack because of things like Rimrock Knight not being a human and being very scary when it's a 5/3 on turn 3. Because of things like Flutter Fox becoming a 4/3 flyer on turn 3 with a Rose Thorn Hallberg. Yes, if you have to re-equip this, it really sucks. But that first auto-equip, if you are almost always going to have a non-human to put it on, is fantastic. It reminds me of Griff's Boon or something like that from older sets, where it's an aura that you can pay a bunch of mana to bring it back from the graveyard. And that was a good card. And this is shockingly decent. Not a first pick. Don't take this to mean that you should be first picking a Rose Thorn Hallberg, but if you haven't been playing it, you have been wrong. Shockingly good. Up next is Fling. Fling is 1 in red for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you must sacrifice a creature. You deal the creature's power to any target. Not a big fan. Fling just doesn't really fit into many decks. There's no steal your stuff and sack it deck because the only active treason just steals garbage, not good creatures. And yeah, there's cute things. You could put Righteousness on something and do this and deal like 10 damage to their face. But outside of doing weird niche case shenanigans like that, you should not be playing Fling. It's just not good. Up next is Flutter Fox. Flutter Fox, this is actually the strongest first pick we've had so far. Flutter Fox is 1 and a white for a creature fox. As long as you control an artifact or an enchantment, it has flying. It's a 2/2. A 2/2 flyer for 2 is nuts. The fact that you could have a Witching Well down, you could have a food down from a Curious Pair. There's things that you can have down on turn 1 that makes this fly on turn 2, and certainly things that you could play on turn 3. Oh, I don't know, maybe a Rose Thorn Hallberg, and make this a very real threat. In my first trophy deck of this format, I was green-white and I was getting Flutter Foxes. I got 2 literal actual last pick on MTGO. This card is great. Do not pass this card. Do not pass this card last pick. It is solid and it's going to hang out in our first pick frame at the moment. It's not really a first pick. It's just this pack hasn't been that good so far. Witch's Cottage is up next. Witch's Cottage is a land swamp. It taps for a black mana. It enters tapped unless you have 3 other swamps in play, but if it does enter untapped, you get to put a creature on top of your library from your graveyard. I haven't been a huge fan of this. I've not been a huge fan. The times that it comes in untapped are relatively rare if you're not mono black or super duper heavy black, and then getting a creature on top of your deck is often just not good. It's often not good unless your bomb or unless something super impactful has died. It's just not going to be much. It's not that exciting if your Malevolent Noble is what goes on top. So I've really not been a big fan of Witch's Cottage. I've seen people playing it, I think, way more than they should have, and I actually actively just avoid playing it at this moment. If I was mono black, sure, it'd go in. It would be basically free, but beyond that, I'm not playing it. Maraleaf Rider is up next. Maraleaf Rider is 1 and a green for a creature elf knight. It's a 3/1 sack of food. Target creature blocks Maraleaf Rider if able. This in draft has been actually pretty decent because in draft you can get yourself 3-4 food without too much hassle. And if you have 3 or 4 food, this probably makes your opponent's team unable to block the rest of your team, and that can just end games. Plus, it's a 3/1 on 2. I love 3/1s for 2 mana. We're getting them in white, we're getting them in red, we're getting them in green. They're everywhere. So I've been pretty happy with Maraleaf Rider. It's not a high pick. It's very middle of the pack, even to like slightly late-ish pack, but I've been happy with it so far. Up next is Hengewalker. Hengewalker is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature golem. It's a 2/2, but if you adamant it out, so you tap 3 mana of the same color for this, it's a 3/3. It's a Centaur Courser. It's fine. If you are a heavy 1-color deck or a monocolor deck, this is basically a Centaur Courser, which means it is a super solid filler. You're happy to have it, but you're not going out of your way for it. Very middle of the pack. That was our last common. We got 10 commons, no foil in this pack. Our first uncommon is Fowl, Meyer Knight, a single black mana for a 1/1 death touch. I love it. And of course, the adventure side of it is Profane Insight. 2 and a black for an instant adventure. You draw a card and you lose a life. This card's just great. You don't want to jam this down on turn 1 if you don't have to. You save it, draw that card, lose that life, and then you have your Typhoid Rats, because Typhoid Rats are great in the middle to late game to hold off big scary threats. This is just a super solid card, and I love Flutter Fox, but it's going to come out of frame right now because this is the strongest first pick we've seen. Archon of Absolution is back from last week. Archon of Absolution is 3 and a white for a creature Archon. It's a 3/2 flyer, protection from white, and creatures your opponents control can't attack you unless they pay 1 for each creature attacking. That's not exactly the way that that's written, but I read it out of my head. This card's great. It's a 3/2 flyer. Protection from white is generally an upside on this card and not a downside like most of the other of its cycles. It's just a super solid card, and I would strongly consider first picking it. I would consider first picking it over the Fowl Meyer Knight. I don't know which one would be correct. Looks like we actually got the print run from last week as well. So Red Cap Melee will often be paired with Archon of Absolution, it seems, in packs. If you didn't watch last week's video, I do have the pack sitting right here. So yeah, Archon of Absolution, Red Cap Melee, they come side by side in packs. Red Cap Melee is a single red mana for an instant. It deals 4 damage to target creature, but if it wasn't a red creature, you have to sacrifice a land. That's a pretty big tempo. If you do have to sacrifice that land, you should not be playing this on turn 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you are going to be targeting a non-red creature. Later in the game, you can kind of consider it to be a very expensive spell and then lose that land, and it's going to be less important. But yeah, it's a good card. I would consider first picking it. Some matches you might have to consider siding it out. And of course, if it is in your sideboard because you didn't have a spot or something, you should bring it in when you see those red cards on the other side of the deck. But it can stay in frame as a consideration as well. Let's see what the rare is. Well, the rare is not going to make this an easy one. Sorcerer's Spyglass. Sorcerer's Spyglass is 2 generic mana for an artifact. As Sorcerer's Spyglass enters the battlefield, look at your opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated not until end of turn, unless they're mana abilities. So, because this comes up a lot at the local game store, I'm sure many of you know this already. An activated ability is anything like Maraleaf Rider here, where there is a cost, sacrifice a food, and then a colon. Look for the colon. There's a colon after sacrifice food. Then it tells you what happens. Target creature, blah, 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 blah. That's an activated ability. It may be an ability where you have to pay mana. It may be an ability where you have to sacrifice something. It may be an ability where you have to tap it, but that is an activated ability. This card's not good. It should never be in your main deck. And even out of the sideboard, there's very few things that I would side this in for. Perhaps a Planeswalker. Turning off a Planeswalker is a pretty big game. Maybe something that is repeatably activated and can be a real problem or a real threat. Maybe this comes out of the sideboard, but you shouldn't be picking this until pretty much last pick if you can. So Sorcerer's Spyglass, not going to hang out. We got a island and an adventure. So yeah, it looks like we're looking at our 3 uncommons for our pick here. We've got Fowl Meyer Knight, Red Cap Melee, and Archon of Absolution. And I think... like I think I said last week, I'm just going to be on the Archon of Absolution here. It's just such a good card. Such a good card. I could see an argument for Fowl Meyer Knight. It is 2 cards on 1 card, essentially, but this card's just been such a beating, and it will just randomly win you games because your opponent happens to be white. So let me know what you've taken in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me over on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. You can find me at patreon.com/manaleek if you want to become a backer, like Squeaky El Lobo did this time, to get your chance to get all the cards out of the Pack 1 Pick ones, and to help the channel out. The easiest way to help the channel out, of course, is to like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you do check out twitch.tv/themanaleek on November 2nd, where I'll be doing that big charity stream with all the giveaways, raising money for my local children's hospital. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time.